Okay, I'm a very average melee player. I've never beaten a power rank player, I've been to a couple of locals, I've never really won anything, but I can get some wins every now and again. I've messed around with pretty much everything in Uncle Punch, but I honestly can't say that I've practiced. Like I would assume it's like for most melee players, I spend most of my time on unranked. That was until I came across a very motivating video by IBDW, which can basically be summarized by saying, if you have an hour or two a day, you can get to a top 100 level in 3 years if you spend your time right. So while 1 month is nothing compared to 3 years, and these things take time, you know, I thought this could maybe serve as a glimpse into whether or not the process works at the surface level. I'm not gonna try to fake improvement or anything like that. If there is no different after a month of concentrated practice, I'll be honest about it. With that being said, what is this process then? How will I be spending my time? I asked world-renowned 3-time Summit invitee Pipsqueak about how he structures his process of improvement, and he said, play in tournament, evaluate, solo practice, test it out in friendlies online, play in tournament. So my plan is to document as much as possible of my experience trying to follow this cycle for 2-3 hours a day, which sadly includes scrapping my mindless unranked playing for the time being, and just see what happens. Let's find out how much you can improve at melee with just 2-3 hours of concentrated practice a day. So in order to make this a tiny bit less subjective, let's just begin with a benchmark tournament. Okay, with that done, let's do the one thing Smashers fear more than death itself, which is VOD review. I simply booted up the Slippery replays and started watching my own games. Whilst dying of cringe, I somehow managed to write down a couple of notes before dropping it for the day. You know, it's one thing to iron out the obvious mistakes you can spot in your own, but to gain a bit of extra guidance and security, I went to YouTube to look up some Puff vs Falco guides, and that's when I noticed something pretty interesting in my opinion. There are a lot of quality resources on how to beat Puff as pretty much every character, but way fewer resources from the Puff's perspective. I did find these 2 videos, which I watched through and applied, spread out over the entire month. Next step is to solo practice the things I need to solo practice. Now, there are a couple of Puff players that say you should completely avoid solo practice as Puff entirely and just play concentrated friendlies. One of those Puffs being Hungrybox, but I mean, what does he know? So, after roughly 30 minutes of Uncle Punch training my power shields and reaction tech chases, I felt ready to try to implement it a bit more seriously. So, instead of clicking that tempting unranked button, I went into the EU Melee Discord and found someone there. Although I have to admit, with the new matchmaking in Unranked, the matches are usually pretty good, even if you only get 1 per person. With the friendly practice processed and done, it was tournament time again. In the upper bracket I got demolished by someone out of my range, although I'm pretty happy with how I played. And in the lower bracket, I got a free win against a Fox I played before. I got a... Fuck. Okay, so seeding wise, this might be my worst loss ever. And I could go into the psychology of why I kept pounding from the ledge like I was trying to get punished. But in the end, I think my way of growing from this upset is the more interesting part. Well, in reality, my practice started to look a lot more like my old routine of mindless friendlies, and I had absolutely zero motivation for analysis. Funnily enough, I actually felt like my movement had become worse at this point compared to day one. While playing a Swedish NES player for 2 hours without a single thought entering my mind might not be the most productive practice, it did help my spacing and decision making a surprising amount. More than playing new characters every game like you do on Unranked. I feel like you forget or at least lose your grip of new knowledge if you aren't able to repeatedly encounter it during a short duration. With that said, I think it's time for another tournament. One huge difference for me now compared to before is that I play tournaments when I'm unsure of what to improve on, instead of just wanting to prove myself every tournament. I say this completely honestly, but it makes the experience so much more enjoyable if your goal is just to figure out as many things as possible to work on. Or maybe I'm just not competitive enough of a player to get that motivation to improve organically. With that being said, I would be lying if I said it didn't feel really good to win every single game in my pools. Of course, I could have taken a lot of those games before, but absolutely biggest difference I've noticed from taking practice more seriously is that I'm playing a lot more disciplined. For example, I had a very close set with a Yoshi player that I'm 100% sure I would have lost to a week earlier, despite not practicing Yoshi at all during this experiment. Some things like patience and not doing the same thing over and over again are universal enough to make a surprisingly decent impact, especially against mid and low tiers. I then got quickly humbled by a Sheik, managed to clutch a game against a Fox player I've beaten before, and... Wait, what's that? Yeah, it's time for some salt. I have gotten a lot of salty messages before, I think everyone does, but I could feel it would be a bit different this time, and I was right. I'll let you read through the rest yourself, but while I don't enjoy other people's unhappiness, it feels pretty good to for once be the one clutching, instead of being the one being clutched upon. Anyways, by following my incredibly complex game plan against Marth, moving the control stick from neutral to a downward position, I managed to yoink out one more set before losing game 5 to the tournament winner. The following days were more of the same. I became religious and began consuming the Puff Bible in a more serious manner than I've been able to before. I watched a bit of Genesis, this becomes important later, and finally, after 18 days of Uncle Punch friendly practice every day, I felt like I was finally good at wave dashing and L-canceling. Okay, maybe good isn't the correct term. It's acceptable for my level, and I can live with that. It might just be because of my massive ego, but I don't really feel like my skill ceiling has rose a whole lot during this time period. But my skill floor, on the other hand, has actually reached a level that I genuinely didn't expect when I started. To put it into perspective, I feel like I've made a lot more progress during these 19 days, just 19, of practice, compared to the entire previous year, which is quite sad when I think about it too long. So let's just move on to the next tournament. Now, before I continue, I need to warn you that things get ugly pretty quickly at this point. After losing against Samus, I had a lot of built up frustration. I also had a Peach next in bracket, and yeah, it's not my proudest moment, I'm gonna be honest. And the worst part is that it actually felt pretty nice. I mean, playing Melee in a stress-free environment like this is honestly pretty relaxing, and after the set I could honestly feel my frustration disappearing immediately. It might have been transferred to someone else, but that is no longer my problem. One thing that I've not done that I think could be very beneficial would be coaching from another Puff player, preferably someone with a lot of experience. Sadly, I am the definition of a greedy goblin, so there are very few situations where I would consider spending money on coaching. Luckily, I got blessed by the gods of luck a month earlier when I won a coaching session with Dawson, who among other things had beaten HBox in the Ditto. I decided to get the lesson mainly focused on the Sheik matchup, since it was by far my worst matchup, which becomes pretty evident the further we got into the lesson.
Yeah, another weird air dodge.
But in the end, I felt like I had gotten a lot more clarity over the matchup, and while I've not fully consumed the entirety of the information yet, I immediately felt a lot more confident, just from having a super basic game plan. Okay, alright, that's enough praise. If you want any more Mr. Metafy, you'll need to pay me. So, let's end off this month-long journey by entering a tournament one last time. I had practiced all the top tier matchups a lot, and honestly, I felt pretty confident. Oh no. I struggled a lot during these games, but I could really feel the practice carrying me through them. Okay, I know it looks like I'm just spamming bear, and I am, but there is a lot of spacing, okay, shut up. I can promise you that I would have lost this set a month ago, but now I actually won game 2 in a pretty dominant manner, which felt really good. Next up is Jamie. He's a really fucking good puff player. His Fox is pretty good as well. He won game 1, but I at least felt like I got to play the same game as him, which was pretty amazing. I haven't really been allowed to do that during previous games with him. And I know this might be one of the most annoying things you can do, but look at this baby, game 2, who was up 2 stocks. It's Arch motherfucking You can send the summit invite to archerbusiness@gmail.com, and that's right, we went last stock as well. I lost, but this was by far my happiest loss ever. I actually felt like I had played a really good set, especially game 2. Losers bracket, I went up against a Swedish Falco player Jormes. He's also pretty good, he has a Liquipedia page. And once again I actually played the game. It was a pretty lopsided game, but it was still a game. And for once I was actually able to think during the game. I didn't think a lot, but you know, there were some thoughts and considerations behind my actions. So, to my surprise, I'm actually a lot more motivated to improve at Melee compared to when I started. My motivation looked kinda like this over the month. Now, did I become a god in these 30 days? No. Did I improve a lot? A bit, but not that much. But it did shift my mindset, and it gave me a lot more clarity about my own skill level and the road to improve over a longer time period, which I actually felt was pretty nice. This isn't meant to be a motivational video, by the way, but if you find yourself getting better results anytime in the future, you are legally obligated to share 60% of your revenue with me. Okay, bye.